here today with our newest and probably one of the most deserving Arizona drag racing legends, Gerald Johns. Gerald has been paramount in the drag racing scene in Tucson and Arizona for a lot of years, about a lot of firsts for us in drag racing. You own the old Tucson Dragway. Gerald, a racer himself, a definite all-around car guy. Thanks for joining us, Gerald.
Glad to be here.
So, where are you from?
Central Florida, St. Cloud, Florida, little town just south of Orlando.
Now it's a big town, probably.
No, it was very small.
Is that one in the cattle country down there? Or
it was cattle country.
Yeah.
At the time, Florida was #1 beef state, but now it's just tourists.
What was the place called? Yeehaw Junction or something like that?
Disney came in, Walt Disney.
Okay.
And that changed it all.
Yeah.
So then I joined the Air Force and left.
So what year did you go into the Air Force?
55. I stayed in 20 years. I retired here at DM.
Thank you for your service. When did you first realize you had an affliction for cars and going fast?
Oh, in the early 50s in high school. There was over Kissimmee, Florida, about 8 miles away, and they had an airport, Seaman Airport, and sometimes they'd have races out there. And there was a guy out there he had a dragster with bed railings on a car with a flathead. It was Don Garland's. And he raced there in the early 50s.
Early swamp rat.
Yeah, and I knew him. Yeah, but it was just no roll bar. His head was a roll bar. You know? but that was it. And we stayed friends throughout the years, still today.
He's still a great guy. I had a chance to talk with him in November. Great guy.
Yeah, I see him every once in a while. He's got that museum up in Ocala, Florida.
If you haven't been to the Drag Race Museum in Ocala, Florida, you need to attend. There's something for everybody there. It's just unbelievable. Yeah, Gerald, you were in the Air Force. What was your specialty?
In the Air Force?
Yeah.
Okay. I was a tech sergeant, and I was in communications security service. Okay. Crypto operator, where code and decode messages and this and that. So we had to have one here at DM because we were flying U-2s to Cuba and up and down the island and then back here to take the pictures. They come back, give me the pictures, and we develop it. Look at the Cubans from way up there.
That was cutting edge back then. That was
Well, they did a lot of interesting things too that never got out. One time there was a U.S. senator, I don't know what state, but he went to Alaska and he was going polar bear hunting, and he was in the guide that he had. They crashed, went down inside the Arctic Circle looking for polar bear, and they couldn't find the airplane. They knew he was dead, but they couldn't find it. And they looked and looked, and they finally got a hold of a squadron here in Tucson, and we said, we'll find it. And they took a U-2, flew from here to the North Pole, found him, came back and told them where it was at. They went up there. There was a plane. Of course, the pilots were dead. that plane was something. There's just one out on display right now at DM. You go out there and look at it.
The greatest thing about that plane is the technology was before transistors to start off with.
Yeah, they had then the SR-71 replaced it. And I remember that Francis Gary Powers, they shot him down somewhere in Europe, and they had pictures of the U-2, and we swore that was not our plane. We weren't doing spying and all this and that. And they showed the Russians showed pictures of it.
Yeah, the Russians got
big embarrassment. You know, I'll never forget. And they had him in prison. He was alive.
And they had to do a prisoner train to get him back.
Yeah.
But fortunately, you didn't have to. You could do it remotely from here. You were part of that.
Yeah.
But you were.
It was interesting though.
Well, but it's all great stuff. So, when you came to Davis-Monthan, were they racing at Davis-Monthan at the time?
Oh yeah, I knew that before. The last place I was stationed was Anchorage, Alaska.
Okay.
And while I was there, I had a friend who was on an angling, little 48 to 53 angling, and we built it locally up there, just a local shop, all steel body, small block Chevy 301. They was doing pretty good there, so one winter we went out to the Winter Nationals in Pomona and got lucky and won it. And there's pictures there in that box there of all that. And anyway, I got into the anglers then, so then I bought one in Riverside, California for $350. The little bitty motor, original. I had an acid dip and started from there. And when I got here in 1968, I was pulling a trailer, homemade enclosed trailer with that angler there. So we raced it out here for a couple of years. And then I had a chance I'd always been Chevy, and there was a car up for sale by Dick Landy, one of his cars, and I bought it. It was a Superstock G, I think, something like that, 4-speed, and guy named Dennis Fowler and I went together. We bought it, and then a year later, or less than a year, I bought Dennis out. And that's what, with the Anglia in 1968, when I got here, I took it out to the track here for the first time.
Was it Tucson Dragway you
Yep,
took it here?
it was the same, a little bit different than whenever I bought it a few years later.
Well, we'll get into that in a minute because it was a lot different because you did a lot of great improvement stuff to the track.
Well,
So with your racing, so you served the Air Force to 20 years, so it's set through 75.
I went from 68 to 75. I was in the Air Force, and all the time I was racing either the Challenger or the Barracuda, and out there until when I got out of the Air Force, I opened an auto parts store on Craycroft and Golfman, and we were doing pretty good there. And about in the early part of '68, Bob Huff had the track, and he was having all kinds of problems. And unfortunately, he had weather killed him too. But there was a lot of different things that every year it was going down, down, down because he wasn't making money and putting it back into the track. And it was pretty run down. So it came up, he couldn't make it anymore, and he owed a lot of money to advertisement. And so he sold it to me.
So you're racing at that time. You remember where did I remember the car, the GD Hemi, and you had a lot of great looking cars. What was your last car that you raced people?
The Barracuda.
Did you when you bought the track and did you continue to race for a while?
No, I had to quit racing when I opened the auto parts store in '75.
That's what happened. Okay.
I couldn't do both.
Right.
And then in '78, the track became open, and I got the auto parts store. But I got the contract, state land, its own state land. I got the contract from State Land Department, and one night I stayed out there and I read the whole contract. And I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that's ever read that contract, because at the end of it, the very last, there was one little paragraph, and it said, in the event that the state ever wants this land back from the leaseholder, it's got the track on it. It was bare land whenever Sunt built it, Sunt Construction Company, and they put the track out there, and with a monthly lease. And it said, in the event the state ever wants the land back, they can pay off and kick the owner out, but pay him off. And one little sentence, it's a day's replacement cost. And I said, what? And I said, man. And I saw that one sentence. And apparently, no one else ever read it. And I did it, and I bought the track dirt cheap. And I go look at it, I said, now, sit out here on Howland Road. It's outside the city limits. So we got wells, we got all kinds of things. It's county. And I know good and well that the land is going to move, the town's going to move toward Benson. And it won't be long, it's going to be, this track won't be here. And so I bought it. But I bought it because of that one sentence in there.
Does that sentence allow you to do the upgrade you did and then know you're going to get paid back for it?
I knew before I bought it.
Yeah.
That's why I bought it.
Yeah, so you knew you could actually fix it up.
Well, there's a well out there. Somebody put a well in the 60s, 63, I think. Well, I know the price of to dig a well, and now today, I don't know who paid for it, I don't know how much they paid for it, doesn't make any difference. If I'm the leaseholder, when the state wants it, they have to pay me cash at today's replacement cost. So I read that, and I had a friend there with a lawyer, and I went out and I said, am I correct in my reading this? He said, yeah. And he, why? I said, I got a chance to buy it, but I want to keep it quiet. And I got a chance to buy this. And then there was all kinds of things out there. The drag strip has to be level. When you look at it from the start line, it looks like you're going actually downhill. But the Sun Construction Company built that drag strip at the specifications of the Tucson International Airport and Davis Mountain's runway. They put those runways in. The materials they used for those two places, the airport and DM, came from Poor Man's Trail, which is the road that the drag strip is on, down toward Pantana Wash. But they had to mix that material out there. They call it ABC. I didn't know this. And anyway, they have to mix it up. It can't have sand. It has to have certain kind of material in it, fleecy, I guess. And it's piled up down there in the mountains. They trucked it from there because that was close. Howland Road wasn't there then, and they went right into DM with it and built those two big facilities out there. It's still down there. It's next door to the track. Well, the track is not level. There's a little mesa out there, and it was going uphill. So they had to level this thing out, the same specification as the airport and Davis Monthan. So they did. But down here, you got to cut the hill out to get it level. So it looks like, when you look at the track, this thing's going downhill. No, it's like it's level.
The shutoff area went up a little bit, so that made it look like it was downhill.
Yeah, but that's on, if you notice on the starting line, you're a little bit above the ground or the desert. Down at the finish line, you come down to the track.
That's right.
And you got well, that's why.
I remember that now, yeah.
I didn't know, but I asked Bill Norman, which was the chairman of Sun Construction Company since way back, and just a wonderful old guy, and I got to know him real well over the years.
So the basic layout of what they built, they did it the right way, and making
it is level.
It's level.
And I didn't know no one knew this. It's probably the first time you've heard of it, but whenever you're preparing an airport or military or the big heavy jets to land on it, it's got to have, the ground has to be prepared way down in different layers with different things. Engineers will do that, and Sunt knew how to do it because he built refineries, airports, harbors all over the world, and they did it because there was a guy, a friend of his, owned stock in Sunt. He was one of the 12 stockholders in Tucson Dragway, which was the corporation that built the track in the early 60s. And here's Bill Norman. And Bill Norman had a small part of the stock of that corporation. That's the corporation that I bought. I insisted I would buy Tucson Dragway with that contract, with the original one, and the original lease, because I read that paragraph. I was after the lease. I wanted that ironclad lease where it says today's replacement cost. That got embedded in my head. And it's a business decision. And it also gave me a few years to put money into it, improvements, so that when a payday comes, today's replacement cost. And it worked out. It worked out fine.
So a lot of improvements were happening after you took it over, and tell us about you knew that concrete was better for starting line, and so you led the way in Arizona.
Well, there was no concrete out there.
Right. No
concrete anywhere. It was chip and seal, wasn't asphalt. And well, you imagine how a drag strip back in the '60s is whenever you put these AA fuels on it now today. But the starting line right now, you can go down the road there and see it. I got pictures of it there. I got a picture of the starting line when I bought it, when I put the first launching pad in that was cement, and the second one I had to put in. And today, I got a picture of it today. It's still there, no cracks.
Tell us a story about your processes on the starting line when you did it once and you did it again.
Man, what a headache that was. We were days out. When I bought it, I had 4 months before the Winter Nationals. And I got pictures of it. The guardrail was all beat up, and the place was pretty bad. And I was working day and night, and it would have been impossible, but I had a lot of help. I had a lot of help from running around track, the racers out here that I knew, Donnie Sink and Cheeseburger and stuff like that, Bill Cheeseburger, and that old crowd, and their crews. And I knew them, and they heard I was going to do that. Here they come. Well, unfortunately, right down the road, on Valencia Road, it's Valencia now, that's the edge of the drag strip property. The shutoff area is Valencia Road. And of course, it's 8-lane now, and it goes across the wash to the bridge. But Tanner used to be down there, the big construction company. And I knew quite a few of the people that worked down there because they were old racers. And they got a hold of me. There was a guy there, Big John, he used to be a racer here. And ran a Willie's coupe, little blue one. And he knew some of those people. And Smiley, Marion Smiley.
Another great guy.
All of his friends.
He was a constructor or contractor or some operator, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. But then they knew friends. Here they come. They worked for Tanner and the other construction company, which is between the track and Pantana Wash. And the boss, Tanner was the key because they had a batch plant for asphalt and for cement. And they gave me a good deal and this and that. And the bosses and the owners they went along with chip in, helping me. And that's how we did it. That's how we rebuilt that place and put staging lanes in. And then we had 16 stages lanes that were 400 feet long. And it was chip and seal, the same as you out here in the parking lot now. But before we moved the scales, put an ET booth in made out of block, cement. It was before there was a wooden one out there. And during the monsoons, it would blow the whole thing over and tear it up every time.
Put it back up.
Huff used to put it back up. And of course, it was over the years. When I bought it, it was on the ground. I mean, it was on runners, but the wind had blown over. So instead of staging it back up, I just hauled it off. And we built one that the cars would come in off the return road, and we had a window there. It was like a McDonald's drive-in. You open the window, and the driver comes up, and you give him his ET slip, which gave him his mile power, ET, and later his reaction time. Whenever we put the first reaction time was into a track here in the state, we put quite a few different things in there. The first cement starting line.
So back at the track, you got the HRA Winter Nationals came to town.
Well, what happened? B-line, which I raced at for many years, it's on the Indian reservation, like everything around Phoenix, and they had to close. So it was a HRA Winter National. Been there for quite a few years. Always a week before Pomona, the NHRA Winter National. So we get cars from all over the country and Australia and Europe. They would go to Pomona, but we get them 1 week before that, or Jim Tice would, which is the president of the HRA. And so we were set up for doing Winter Nationals there. And they quite a few of them. I went to quite a few, raced the Anglias up there, mine and my friend's car. Anyway, they had to close, and Jim Tice said, "Well, I'm going to do my Winter National." Bob Huff says, "I'll take it." And they said, "Okay, you know what you're getting into?" "Oh, no, Bob, we can do it." And they did. And they moved those bleachers, which were 24 rows high, on both sides of the track, down here. Well, some of them didn't have pads for them to sit on, but here was the bleachers, and they got, there's a lot of lumber into the new boards, but it was all metal bleachers that you could unbolt, put them together, put them out here, put them on. It's just like scaffolding is what it was, but they're bleachers. So they did all that work, and I think they probably had 2 or 3 years of Winter Nationals here, and then this track could not hold it at all. I mean, we had little 4 staging lanes. We had scales, but they were right there in a staging lane. No ET booth, that wooden thing. It was not set up for Winter National, and it was pretty equipment. A lot of downtime, this and that, and so they were leery of that, but they did it for about 3 years, and then had bad weather, this and that, and then saw Huff sold to me. And so then Jim Tice came to me and said, "You're going to buy that?" "Yep." He flew down here and we talked for about a week. And of course I said, "Now look, I'm a neophyte. I don't know anything about running a drag strip, but I have a business mind. I'm running it not as a sport, as a business and a sport. And I got a few years experience in business, but many years in sport, so I think I can do it." And I've been way off more than I can chew, but the Tucson jumped in and helped me. It wasn't me. There's no way you could do that with money too. You couldn't even go out and buy the things that we did with cash. But the racers here in town, not just track racers, I want to emphasize that, because the big help come from the round track racers right out here.
I knew a lot of those guys over the years, the round around guys, and they're just good people. Yeah, and I'm sure that Tucson, there's a certain pride to Tucson, that Tucson pride, and I'm sure they wanted that Winter Nationals to be better than it was.
Well, like this track here is owned by the county, I'll assume, and if you have something as beautiful as this place is, and this is a dream. I walk out here and just go, wow, but then they don't have the crowds either. But my track, it's a business and a sport, and it was built by Tucson racers, not tax money, built by Tucson racers, and it had to make a profit just to stay open. My objective was to keep it open until the day the city moved the city limits out here, and I've already read the contract. It actually was a lease, but that was a lease. I went to my lawyer first. I said, this little paragraph here, I want to talk to you about that. Didn't talk about anything else. I didn't care about anything else. And I probably wouldn't have bought the place because anyway, they had lost their beer license way back. Someone from a minor, I don't know what it was. It doesn't make any difference. There was no beer license. It was, you know, if something happens in a bar and they lose their license, you know, their brother is not going to sell the bar to his brother, and he goes and gets another license. They stay open. That's it. Yeah. I said, well, I need a beer license in order to survive, and they said no. So then I got help from the governor really and a senator up there, and they gave me a beer license. Okay, so we'll do it. Well, I already bought it, but they told me they would do it for me, and I took their word for it, and I bought it, and they followed through. Anyway, my objective was to keep the place open, and I had to. It wasn't easy. It was kind of bad. So.
Well, it was an awesome track. It was fun to go. I would always come down from Phoenix, and love the racers and the hardcore, like the junior pro stock and the different unique things to Tucson that they run down here in Tucson. Were awesome to watch. Right now, you refer to this track where for everybody's watching this video, we're at the new the new Tucson Dragway. Jim Hughes was kind enough to let us use his hospitality room to do the filming today. But your track from the beginning when you got it, and then when you got turned it over, and then when it was regularly running the HRA races under your leadership, what a big difference. I mean, the car started running good numbers, and something to really be proud of.
Well, I am, especially, I'm proud of the people that built it and kept it running. And then we got all of those photos of where the place is full, and the parking lot's full. I got pictures, aerial photos over Sunday of every one in Nashville, and you can see the pits, and the staging lane, and the crowds. And then every year it was enlarged. But you can't do. This is state land rules. You can't make an improvement on the land unless you get permission in writing, and I made sure it was in writing because someday I'm going to get paid for this improvement, but I can't just go out there and do whatever I want to and expect to get paid for stage replacement costs. So I had to be very careful to do that.
Good.
And get permission to do it. So then every year from these photos, you can see the parking lot increase for cars and for the spectators, both sides. And some of those pictures are amazing. One picture is 1,000 words. When you see cars lined up on Poor Man's Trail, which is the road that comes in from Houghton, end of the track, and they're lined up on the side of the road that comes in. Spectators and racers, only one road in. And then you got Houghton Road, and they're lined up on both sides all the way to Irvington, which is a mile away. That's where the end of the track is. And then it goes to the right, goes north to Pantana Wash, and they're lined up on both sides. Those people parked out there and walked all that way to get in. And so I said, wow, look at this. After the race, I'm looking at this, and I saw the crowds. And we used to measure if you had a good race or not. Other track owners, when we have our meeting once a year, they'd say, well, how much fence did you have to replace after your national event? And the guy that had to spend the most money to replace fence, he made the most money because he had the biggest crowd.
They pushed them, yeah.
They pushed every chain link fence I had down. The posts were in cement, but they'd bend the post over down the side of the track. And that's a badge of success. How much fence did they tear out?
It's kind of like a good problem to have?
Oh man, I went out there one time, I think it was a Saturday night. Sunday is the big day, and the parking lot's full, and they can't get in, they're plugging up everything. And I had a lot of security out there. I had to pay for the county and city police. That was my security. They did a great job. And they said, we got cars in there, we're going to have a big problem when the race is over to get them out. And I said, okay. So the barbed wire fence around the parking area was these metal posts, fence posts you put in with barbed wire. And I had a car that Raleigh Chevrolet gave me. It was a car and a van for the track. And I took a tow strap, put it around the fence, and hooked it underneath the back of that Impala, and just took off to the desert. And I ripped out about a quarter mile of barbed wire fence so they could go out into the desert and park. It was Tucson Dragway land, but it's fenced in. That's how I increased the size of the parking lot, by ripping the fence out. Oh, man, But I had to do it on Sunday night or Saturday night for the next crowd next day. And they got out that way.
And the state probably appreciated you putting people in the track instead of parking on the highway.
But people that saw me do it thought I was crazy. They thought I was some spectator trying to get out. I just ripped the fence out. And I had that Impala wide open.
Well, some people would say, Gerald, that you have to be a little bit crazy to own a drag strip in the first place.
Well, yeah. Well, you should have heard home, especially my family. They go, what are you doing? And lawyers, lawyer family. What are you doing? In fact, I had to get rid of one lawyer and get another one because in a bookkeeper, he had a fit. He said, what are you doing? You look at the past history. Are they making money? If you're going to buy a business, you want to go back at least 3 years. Let me see your profit. I want to see your tax statement. Did you make money? Did you lose money? Of course, when you go to sell one, like I sold to my auto parts store, I go to sell it and they say, we want to see you 3 years. You got it. And they'd say, the profit that you made those 3 years before, like Bob Huff, his was down. So the price is down. Well, my auto parts store was going up every year. And we were taking that profit, putting it in the inventory. And so it looked real good, and I got a good price for it. So I sold it at a profit, the business and the inventory, but I kept the land, the business there on Quaker. So anyway, that's how I got it so cheap from Bob Huff.
Well,
And the state got nothing out of it, but there was a corporation, and there were stockholders of the corporation. So I wasn't buying it from Huff, I was buying it from the corporation. So I had to have the approval of them to sell me the lease. The corporation. It was Arizona Motor Speedway. What it was, Arizona Motor Speedway. It remained that the whole time I had it.
I appreciate personally that when you started putting a concrete track in and made a Phoenix Dragway, and then other tracks building with concrete starting lines. I used to have a speed shop back in the 80s.
Every one of the nationals, all the track owners in American Hot Rod Association would come to Tucson. And they would meet down there in Montana, which was race headquarters, with the pro racers. Garland, Downey, Cordome, McEwen, all of them. And they would talk and discuss the coming year's contracts. And those pro racers had contracts. I had contracts with Garland, Downey. There was 4 or 5 that I had contracts with racers, but I had contracts with other people too. And we would settle it right there at the Montana during race time. Well, they would come every year, these track owners, and they'd see improvements. And then they wouldn't watch the races, they were watching the track.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, big track, big San Antonio, Spokane, Kansas City, big track, much bigger than Tucson Dragway. But they would see the improvement in the crowd and the way the show would run. Never a minute downtime. And blah, blah, blah. And they go around, and these are businessmen that have more businesses than the racetrack in St. Louis. And they would see it, and they'd come talk to me, and they'd ask me questions, but not at race time. They knew I was pretty busy. And they'd just say hello and stay out of the way. And then they go home, and they call me. And every year I'd have improvements, and they would see it, and we would discuss it. So it was more things going on than just the races.
And drag strips, you have to have somebody really passionate who's willing to, has extra money, which extra money is really hard to define, but there's really not a big return on investment, and what to build a modern day drag strip. So that's why we have to fight hard to keep our current ones going, because it's hard, it would be hard to replace. I know this one, there's a backstory of it. Somebody that owned a bunch of, lived on a street somewhere, was on the county fair commission, and they were doing a bunch of street racing by his house. Yeah. And that kind of sparked him to get everybody to go, why can't we put a drag strip out at the fairgrounds? And that's kind of the story I heard, but but that's how the county got involved with it, because somebody had the power. You were smart enough, and you grew it where the politicians knew you were there, and they saw the benefit to Arizona, the tourism. Look how many people came from out of town to your races.
Well, there was more involved in that.
Yeah.
As usual, as any story, there's a lot of things that people don't see, never thought about. Mm-hmm. And that's not saying anything bad about the people. I'm one of them. But there's things happen at places like that that affect the community. One little thing pops in mind. It's kind of silly. No one will ever talk about it, but it's kind of interesting, and it tells a story too. But there was 2 things. I used to have on Saturday night on regular summer races. Friday night was high school night. Every high school got some kids that got cars, and we would keep points. And we had different classes. They were all street cars, all kids, had to have a driver's license, and had to do class inspection, this and that. But all illegal street racing stopped throughout the county, throughout Tucson. We used to race on Wheeler Road out here, where there was a nice piece of asphalt in the county, way Wheeler Road. Now you know what it is. Anyway, they went by points, and the schools would be in the pits. School here, school here, school here, school here. And there was one time there was a kid out there, and I saw him, a high school guy, and he'd been drinking beer. And I saw him, they had the beer right there. And I went by and said, hey, I need to talk to you. Come here. I said, you can't do that. Yeah, I know. And he has a girlfriend there. He's probably 18 years old, and a nice little car that he thought the world of, And his girlfriend was there with him always, and his whole crew. And I said, well, you gotta go. You gotta go out. And he said, oh, okay. And I said, and if I ever see this again, and there was a crowd came around, which really I wanted. Mm-hmm. I wanted them all to. I said, you're going now. He said, well, we won't race anymore. I said, no, I know you're not going to race anymore. In another word, you're not going to race next week either. And he said, oh, yeah. Anyway, so I had to kick him out. And okay, I get a phone call from his dad the next week. My son said he paid to get in there and you kicked him out because he was drinking, and then you kicked him out and wouldn't let him to stay there even though he agreed not to race anymore. And well, this guy's hot at me. And I know the guy. The guy is a racer that races every weekend at the track. So when he races on Saturday night, his son's out there Friday night. Anyway, we were good friends.
Gerald, by doing that, I mean, that's part of the problem with today's youth. Nothing has consequences.
Yeah.
Here's consequences were you can't come back for a while.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you that one. Yeah. That one brings up every subject. You got to bring up more things. Once upon a time, the racers, I was going to increase the prize money for certain classes, and I increased the prize money more for a lower class than I did these two classes here. Well, the people that race here, they saw that actually in my newspaper. They said, wait a minute, the C cars are getting an increase, and the B cars and the A cars are not. So here they come to me, and they organize the racers. They're racers. They don't think business and racing. And they had a list. And they said, if you don't raise our amount of our prize money the same as these people, we're going to boycott your race. We're not coming out there. I said, oh yeah? I'll listen to them. And they said, so you'll have to close the gate because you're not going to have any drivers, no racers, and you won't have any spectators. I said, okay. So they said, what do you think? I said, my turn to talk? He said, yeah. I said, okay. I get a copy of that. Yeah, we made you a copy, so you'll know who these racers are, and they all signed it. I said, that's good. Now it's my turn. I want that list, and I'll make copies of this, and it'll go to the people on the gates that take the money when you come in. These people on here will no longer be able to race here in Tucson with their drag car. They can do one thing, they can go to other tracks, which there's no other tracks in Tucson, in Arizona, period. You go to California or Texas and race your car every Saturday night. Or you can go buy a bowling ball and get you a new sport because you're through. I'm going to honor your demands. Either I get a choice. You gave me a choice just now. I can pay you or they're not going to race. I'm not going to pay you, but this is a business. To you, it's a sport. But you're not going to tell me how to run my business. So you or your crew, and especially your car, will never come into this drag strip again. Now you can go sell the car until you get sick. I'll sell it to my brother and I'll keep raising it. The car has been banned. You can come to the races. You and your family can come to Winter National and enjoy yourself, but that car will never cross it. And they said, what, you can't do that. I said, why not? I can't make you come race, but you can't make me let you into my business. And that boycott lasted about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And they clean their act.
Let us think about this. Yeah. Consequences. Gerald, you've done so much for the Tucson and Arizona Committee drag race community, and we really appreciate all that you've done. We appreciate you taking time to be here.
It was fun. Now, especially back years later, the old racers, and some of them, I swear, they'll say, remember me, I used to race out there every night? And I always say the same thing, which is not true. It was a lie. But I say, I remember you, and I remember that car. And he said, yeah, it was the so-and-so. I said, yeah, I remember that. I don't remember. I don't know the guy.
You're a good salesman.
But boy, it made him. And then guys would come to him and say, my dad used to race out there when I was a kid. I get a lot of that. Who's your dad? He'd say, who? I said, I don't know him. Well, I don't know that guy. But,
well, what you did tell me before we started filming was the fact that you have a lot of pictures and stuff, and of the old racers and all those days, and people want pictures. You oblige them. You're not there for making money off those pictures.
well, I've got them right here.
Yeah, but they have to come look through them, and it's just really great that you do that, because
I got
people move and they lose their own pictures, and there are a lot of good memories, and that's what we do the Arizona Legends video, because what you did in Arizona and Tucson especially is definitely legendary, and you create a lot of new racers. That
I want to say something about those pictures you're talking about. My son brought me. He lives in San Antonio down, Mike Johns, and he comes over. He's got all these pictures in boxes, and he brings them to me every once in a while, and I go through them. I bought that box full today. There's 90% of the pictures in there are all, 100% are Arizona pictures that are taken at the track. And a lot of them, I don't know the cars, I don't know the people, but there's people out here that do. I've got a lot of pictures and a lot of newspaper clippings and this, that, but mostly pictures of cars and drivers and pit crew. And I have a policy, I have a sign too. It says, no pictures are for sale, none of them. None of this on this table that's on display is for sale, but they're all free. But you can't just go there and get them. Now, if you see a picture of a friend or your father, your neighbor, or you used to work on that car, that's so-and-so, they'll say, when you come to me with that picture, you can have it. It's yours. Good luck with it. But
that's great.
I've got a little thing about, it's just me. I don't understand hoarders, people that hoard things, and they put it in the closet and they'll never see it. Years later, they die and it goes to the dump.
Have you been talking to my wife?
What in the world? In my house, I say, look, everything in this house I use. If I don't use it, even though one time I did, I'm going to get rid of it. I'll give it away.
I hope my wife doesn't hear this, because we just went through the garage 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't believe the stuff I found. I didn't even know I owned anymore. So yeah,
But in this case, there's some pictures in that box I gave you there right now. There's people in the background of a picture of a car, giving a trophy or something. And it tells a story. It means a world to them. And it's sitting in my closet. No, that ain't going to happen.
Thank you for doing that, Gerald.
I'll tell you this, the people who listen to this, if you used to race, your dad used to race, your grandfather used to race, I probably got a picture of it.
Gerald, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here today. Thank you, Gerald.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
It's awesome.